Yavapai Broadcasting and the City of Cottonwood proudly present Inside Cottonwood, an inside look at the decisions and issues of the City of Cottonwood. Brought to you by Arizona Smile Designers.
Welcome to Inside Cottonwood. I'm Mayor Diane, your host, Mayor Diane Jones, and we have a guest this month, and I think it's going to be a very informative interview today. We have State Land Commissioner Maria Beyer with us. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for inviting me to be with you this morning.
You're welcome. Thanks for driving up from Phoenix, and hope it was a beautiful drive for you.
Always beautiful to drive to Cottonwood, and beautiful once you get here.
It is. We love our community. I just want to mention today that I'm wearing a blue ribbon in honor of Child Abuse Prevention Month. So I just thought I would share that with our television audience. So I want to just start off with a little bit of information about you. And I know that you have quite a long history of service in state government as well as some other areas. You were just appointed the Arizona State Land Commissioner in June of 2009, as I understand it. But before that, you served as a Phoenix City Councilwoman. You also were 10 years on the executive staff of the Office of the Governor, serving through 2 administrations. That's pretty amazing to serve through 2. And you have a background in communications, and you were a lead speechwriter while at the governor's office. I'm pretty impressed with these credentials. And a public information officer for the Arizona State Attorney General's office. So you also received your Bachelor of Arts degree from Arizona State University and your Juris Doctor from the James E. Rogers College of Law at the University of Arizona in Tucson. So you're pretty much an Arizona girl through and through, it sounds like.
Born and raised in Arizona, and love every inch of it. So.
Yes, all right. The perfect person to serve as Land Commissioner for the State Land Department. Well, I invited you here today because there are so many misconceptions about state trust lands. And everybody has their own idea of what they are. So I thought, well, we'll just do an interview with Maria Beyer and just find out what the facts truly are. So I just kind of thought we'd start out today with the mission of the State Land Department.
Well, what we do at the State Land Department is we manage 9.3 million acres of land in Arizona that is held in a trust to benefit public institutions, primarily public education, K-12 schools. And so it's our mission to generate revenue for these trust beneficiaries.
All right, so state trust lands, a lot of people think that you can just go out and hop a fence and have this beautiful hike, and we have many social trails on state trust lands. In fact, there's one just outside of Cottonwood that people have been using, and there were some comments recently in the newspaper about being upset that the fence was fixed, and they didn't understand that. Do you want to explain a little bit, are state trust lands public property?
State trust lands are not public land, and that's a common misconception, and we understand why it exists, but they are not public lands. And so I think that it's helpful sometimes to go back through a little bit of the history, because the operative word in the title State Trust Lands is the word trust. And so a little about the history.
Okay, please share.
When Arizona became a territory, and then later when it became a state, Congress took sections of land, and a section is a mile by a mile square, and they took it out of the inventory of federal lands, and they granted those lands to the territory and then later to the state of Arizona. And the reason that they granted those lands to the state of Arizona was because they wanted us to make money off of the sales and lease of those lands in order to start funding the institutions of government. Because think back to the territorial days, there was very little commercial activity.
Nothing going on at all.
There was no
railroads kind of had a little bit.
They were the sort of primary commercial activity.
And they gave some land to railroads also, right?
Yes, there were railroad grants. And so when Congress granted those lands to the state of Arizona, they were actually, at that moment, they were put into a trust. And the trust instructions from Congress were that we must make as much money as we can off of those lands so that we can fund the beneficiaries. And like I said, the K-12 schools are our primary beneficiary, so that about 87% of the trust lands that we have are held to benefit the schools, and then another 7 or so percent goes to the state's 3 universities.
Okay.
And then the remainder is divided among several other beneficiaries like prisons, the School for the Deaf and Blind, the Pioneer Home, and the state hospital. And so it's really our job on these trust lands to make money, and because they're held in trust, we cannot vary from the instructions that attach to the trust from Congress. And so we can't discount the use or the sale of these lands. We can't allow anybody the use of those lands unless they've compensated the trust. And we can't give away any of the assets of the trust. And this includes the land itself, the use of the land, and or any of the natural resources that occur on or below the land. For example, any of the flora and fauna, if it's a saguaro, if it's even a plant of any value, it's a trust asset. And of course any of the minerals, and we make a lot of money off of our mining operations every year. And so all these things are an asset of the trust. They have value, and it's our job as trustees to make money to feed into the public schools and other beneficiary coffers. And so we don't have the kind of latitude that people think that we have to just allow uses or giveaways or set-asides or anything on state trust lands. The express provisions are that we make money for the beneficiaries. And it's very clear in the State's Enabling Act, which created the state of Arizona. The provisions were carried over into the Arizona State Constitution. Right,
so the Constitution also backs up what you can and cannot do without the lands. So a lot of times, we have 10 square miles here in the Verde Valley, and people would really love to see that just be open space forever. But do you have that, based on the Constitution and the Enabling Act, do you have the ability to make the whole 10 square miles open space? What is it that you would be required to do with the land according to the Constitution? According to the Constitution, if the land remains in the custody of the State Land Department unless somebody wishes to buy it or lease it. And then if they submit an application to buy it or lease it, we have to determine whether it's the appropriate time and the appropriate parcel to sell or lease. We cannot simply put a designation on a piece of land and say this is going to be open space. That would be squandering an asset of the trust. And so just as when there are some people who have private trusts, we operate exactly the same way. We have to follow the trust instruction. So we cannot just say, sure, take this, we can give this away, we can give this to you, we can allow it for your use at no cost. All those are off the table. Anytime anybody has tried anything like that, and there's been many attempts, many variations on that theme. Yes. It's gone to the courts. And the courts strike it down. The courts absolutely prohibit it. And the people, there have been initiatives that have gone to the people, like I think about 4 or 5 times, maybe more, asking them to change the Constitution to allow more lands to be conserved. And the people of Arizona have voted that down every time. And I don't know whether it's people are afraid that the schools will be harmed financially, or why people always vote no on conservation for state trust land, but they do.
I think that it's largely a factor of the complexity of the language. The ballot language, because the laws that attach to the management of state trust lands are so complicated themselves, because it's a combination of real estate law, government, and trust law. So it's a very complicated matrix of laws that govern our activities of the land department. And so in order to make the changes to the Constitution and to the statutes that would enable, you know, a different kind of conservation paradigm, the ballot language ends up becoming enormously complicated. And so I think people tend to vote no on measures when they can't fully understand what they're trying to accomplish.
They are so complicated. When you talk about 9.2 million acres, that's a lot of land to, you know, apportion to conservation or deal with conservation. I think these things will continue to come before the people as as Arizona builds out and people are interested in the open spaces. We're time for a break right now, so we're going to take a minute, take a break, and when we get back, we'll continue this really interesting conversation. Be right back.
Care Bear Childcare has the right childcare for your family, because families today have so many needs. They have great hours, 5:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., and they're open on Saturdays. Care Bears features infant and toddler programs and also have preschool, before and after school care with transportation to most schools, and they even provide all the meals. Care Bear Childcare Center, behind the House of Ruth on North 12th Street, Cottonwood. Call 634-9613. A DES contract provider.
Meet the team at Arizona Smile Designers, offering complete, comprehensive, restorative, and aesthetic dentistry. Dr. Vergara and Dr. Lord specialize in dental health, implants, and cosmetic dental procedures. Expert staff and state-of-the-art equipment bring forth the most from your smile. Dr. Ripplinger conveniently comes to Arizona Smile Designers for oral surgery and complicated procedures. Visit Arizona Smile Designers at 350 South Willard in Cottonwood. Insurance and new patients are welcome. Call 634-8610.
Welcome back to Inside Cottonwood. I'm Mayor Diane Jones, your host, and we have today with us Maria Beyer. She is the State Land Commissioner for the state trust lands in Arizona. And we've just been having a great conversation and learning about state trust lands and what does that mean, and essentially would you compare them more to being private property than public?
Very much so.
Okay, very much private property. So that's just the hardest thing I think for people to understand. I've always had a question that no one's really been able to answer for me. I've always wondered, you know, usually they're checkerboard, the state trust lands. And if you go up into Chino Valley, you have checkerboards. You have some checkerboards around the headwaters of the Verde River. We do have, you know, pieces of state trust lands kind of here and there throughout the Verde Valley. But how in the world did we get this huge square of 10 square miles right here in the Verde Valley? How did that work?
Well, you are exactly right that most of the land grants were done in a checkerboard fashion. We got sections 2 and 32 from the federal government when we became a territory, and then 6 and 36 when we became a state. And a section is, as I said earlier, a mile by a mile, and a township is 6 miles by 6 miles. So they're all numbered. The sections are numbered sequentially, and so that's why you see this checkerboarded pattern across most of the state. But in some cases, even though the federal government had identified all of those acres of land to be granted to the state of Arizona, when it came time to actually deed the land over, they discovered that in some cases not all of those sections were available. They had already been granted to somebody else through homesteading or the railroad, as we said before. So then there was a number of sections that we just had to pick from all the other available land. So we may have gotten it because we got to pick in lieu lands, in lieu of the sections that were originally granted to us. We're going to take these because we had a cluster of lands that were already granted to somebody else. Or the other way that we have some of these larger blocks of land in the state are they're lands that came in later as compensation to the trust when the federal government took some of our trust lands for other purposes. For example, when some of the Indian reservations were created, the federal government took some sections of state trust land to create those Indian reservations, and then they said, okay, you can go pick from the remaining BLM lands. So I think that the lands that we have here were either in lieu selections or the product of the compensation for lands that were taken after the creation of the trust because state trust lands were needed for another purpose.
All right, thank you very much. So, to answer the question again, why can't we just all keep this for open space? We've been through that. So tell me, what are you mandated to do with the land, especially the 10 square miles? I mean, so we can't keep it all for conservation. I know that the city's been working on an annexation process, and we've been really working with you trying to conserve as much as we can, you know. But what does highest and best use mean exactly?
That's a great question, and we've had many interpretations from the courts over the years when they feel that we haven't done a very good job of determining what highest and best might mean. So there's a lot of instructions from the courts on highest and best. First of all, let me thank you and the leadership here in this community, because you really have taken the time and effort and, you know, expended the resources to come up with a very good conceptual plan for this large area of state trust land. And I know that you hired a great consultant to do it. You've had a lot of public meetings,
yes, we have.
And that is, I just can't think of a community that has done more of that than you have. So hats off to you. And I think it's going to pay big dividends. And so, if the land has to be developed, highest and best use, which we'll get to, we want to do it in the best way we can with concerning water, wastewater, densities. You know, I know that we've gotten those densities down tremendously, yes, with our consultant working with your team. Yes. And so highest and best use. So, you know, we've got this 10 square miles and we have to deal with it. That's exactly right. And so the dream that all of it can be preserved forever is not a realistic dream, because clearly there is some, what we would call in our jargon, there's some commercial viability to a tremendous amount of that land. And so we would be in violation of our obligations as trustees if we allowed underutilization of those lands. Okay. And so you can see that these lands are going to be a growth area for development. And there's no reason that the lands that are immediately adjacent to the trust land should be developed and somebody should be making a profit off of those, and yet right across the line the state trust land is going to be conserved and not bring in any revenue. That would be a violation of our obligations as trustee. So what we try to do is we try to look at the acreage like this and say, okay, how can we make sure that this trust land is at least treated equitably with other land in the area, other commercially developable land, and so use that reality as the baseline in terms of the land use planning, as opposed to going on into either of the extremes, where we take the position that we think that this ought to have the densities of Tokyo. Mm-hmm. Or say some advocates who say this should have zero development whatsoever. What we do in the best of all possible worlds is work with thoughtful communities like yours to say, okay, what really is a reasonable use of the land? Because we could argue that the highest and best might be Tokyo, but that's not realistic. Right. I think we started out with 22,000 units when we first started working with your staff. And so then we look at, okay, what's a reasonable allocation, as you said, of the infrastructure dollars that you have to allocate? What's a reasonable expectation of the water supply that's in this community.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
and you look at what you need to do to make sure that you can sustain your tax base, to make sure that you can serve the public by growing your tax base some, which would include the productive use of some of these lands. And so it's very much a give and take in this land use planning, and we find out what your real constraints and opportunities are, and then we try to work with you, and within those constraints, being realistic, we say, okay, there's going to be X percentage of this land that is going to be preserved because it's either slope or otherwise undevelopable, or because simply your existing municipal water supply is not going to be able to support greater densities than this. And we can go then and defend a transaction, defend a land use plan that reflects the realities.
Wonderful. So this is a question of mine. You can take water supply into consideration. The courts will allow that. We
have to. You know, I mean, we hope to not have to go to court on these issues. But yes, I mean, at the end of the day, we do have to take the realities of the
infrastructure and the supply and
into account.
Right, because Arizona with 99.2 million square miles of land, and Arizona is a dry state as far as water, you know, it is good to know that you can take those issues into accountability.
And another thing that we take into account is the cost of infrastructure. So there are some communities where, you know, if it's 10 square miles, the cost of taking the infrastructure out to the hinterlands for the municipalities is unrealistic. And so when you look at how you're going to allocate your resources, your utilities, your water lines, your sewer systems, and I know you have a unique plan for the
we're going to have 7 different small package plants, so that all the water can be reused in there. We're talking about purple pipe, so that reclaimed water can go to toilets. I mean, we really want to make this an example or a model of good conservation. And we need to stop now for another break, and so we'll be right back in just a moment.
Meet the team at Arizona Smile Designers, offering complete comprehensive, restorative, and aesthetic dentistry. Dr. Vergara and Dr. Lord specialize in dental health, implants, and cosmetic dental procedures. Expert staff and state-of-the-art equipment bring forth the most from your smile. Dr. Ripplinger conveniently comes to Arizona Smile Designers for oral surgery and complicated procedures. Visit Arizona Smile Designers at 350 South Willard in Cottonwood. Insurance and new patients are welcome. Call 634-8610.
Thousands of fires across the United States are caused by careless people. Hi, I'm Fire Marshal Rick Contreras with the Cottonwood Fire Department. The major threat of human-caused fires are from burning debris that get out of control or improperly extinguished or unattended campfires. Remember that fireworks have no place on our wild lands. Become part of the solution. Learn more about proper fire safety by contacting the local fire department.
So we were just talking during the break about how you would get a recreation permit. So, you know, people want to go hiking or they want to go camping. Can they do those things on state trust land?
They can do it if they have a recreational permit.
Okay.
And that's a really important point, because under the law, to be on state trust land without a permit of some sort actually puts you in trespass. Now, that's not to say we go out and cite everybody for trespass, but under the law, without a permit, it really is a trespass. And so we encourage everybody who wants to recreate on state trust land to go ahead and get one of those recreational permits. And you can obtain the application by contacting our office, and I'll give the phone number, which is area code 602-542-4621, Or you could go on our website, which is www.az.land.gov, and you can find out about the recreational permits there. We don't yet have those available online. We're hoping to go online with the rec permits someday soon. But it really is a great idea if you think that you're going to want to use state trust land, and there's a lot of gorgeous state trust land, so there's every reason that people should want to recreate on state trust land. But we really hope that if people choose to do that, that they will have a permit. They also can recreate on state trust land if they have the indicia on their off-highway vehicle. That's the other way that people are allowed to use state trust land, is the little indicia. And then the third way is hunting is allowed on state trust land as long as they have a tag, as long as they're engaged in an actual hunt. So they can't, just the fact that they're, you know, that they once had a license or that they once had a tag is not evidence enough to be on the land. But if they're engaged in an actual hunt, the hunters are also allowed to use state trust land.
Well, great.
So those are the three ways to be legal on state trust land.
Yeah, we had a few, like I said, disgruntled citizens that, so if someone wants to hike every day on state trust lands, that someone that lives in Cottonwood or the Verde Valley, they can get a permit to do that?
$15 for the entire year.
$15 a year.
They can branch out to all over the state, all 9.3 million acres.
What a bargain.
It is.
So yes, get on the website if you like to hike state trust lands, and I know that we're working right now on trying to move a trail out there on state trust lands over more into the city side so that people can still access it and get onto the Coconino National Forest. But it is good to know if they do want to use that trail in those state trust lands, get your permit and you can do that. Wonderful.
And one of the things that's not apparent to everybody is the reason that we have to be thoughtful about where we allow trails is because almost all of our land is already leased to somebody.
Right. I think there's a lot of cattle grazing on this 10 square miles.
And so, you know, if people who are not in the ranching business don't always understand the difficulties of that business, but they cannot have, you know, gates and fences down, you know, because cattle get out, and that's that would be like for the rest of us, you know, having somebody, you know, kind of interfere with your computer at work or something like that. So so broken fences and broken gates
and
for cattle.
Unclosed gates. And so be responsible. If you get your permit and you're on public lands hiking, be appreciative and honorable to those who already maybe lease the land, and treat the land respectfully, and also the leasee.
I think that's great advice. Thank you.
So just kind of to wrap up, we just have a couple more minutes, but I want to close with probably talking a little bit more about Cottonwood and its effort to ensure that if the lands are developed, that they are inside the city, because we can deal more with water and wastewater issues than counties can. And so that is why I think that Cottonwood has pursued this effort, knowing that they are private property, they are likely going to be developed, and feeling that if they are, they should be inside the city limits. So just to share, the last plan that we did, we had gotten the density down from, I think, around, it may have been more than 22,000 units, but we have gotten the density down to 12 under working with you guys. And you know, we appreciate your commitment to doing the best thing, to thinking about the water, the reclaimed water, encouraging that use, and working with us on all of those things. And I just kind of want to close up with, you know, I had given, during the public meetings that we held, a member of the public had given a map to your staff members and said, why can't we preserve all of this? And one thing that he showed me was that the state land department couldn't even legally do that, but he showed the map of all of the lands in the Verde Valley that belong to the Forest Service, and that we have so much open space in the Verde Valley, which we love and cherish and never want to give up. But when he compared these private state trust lands with all of the public lands, he said he didn't think it's the governor and the attorney general and
the
treasurer make these decisions about annexations, and that they could not look at that and give, you know, more land to open space because there was so much already. And I know that will be kind of a hard pill for some to swallow, but that's what I was told.
I think that's correct. I think that, you know, when people, and certainly members of the selection board who, like me, are charged with making sure that the beneficiaries are taken care of, I think when you see that there is a value that is supposed to go to benefit public schools, which those lands do belong to the public school trust.
Yes, they do.
So we make money for teachers' salaries, for classroom size reduction, for dropout prevention, and those kinds of things. So we can't just look the other way and not expect to make money off those lands. And so I admire the dreams of those, and you know, we all love open space.
We all hike, and we love our Arizona.
That's why we live here.
Yes.
But just like any other private property owner, I just can't give them away. Somebody's supposed to realize some money off of those, and in this case, it's the public school. So those are our constraints at the land department. But I, as I said before, really admire your community, because I think you've come up with a great plan where some of the very special places under your plan would remain preserved. So I think each side gets a little, and in some ways each side gets a lot. So hats off.
Well, thank you so much, and we do appreciate your cooperation with us, and it's, you know, we'll be working together in the future. We'll be having more public meetings when we go take this to general plan amendment, I guess is where it goes next, and there will be more opportunities for the public to input, and we're looking forward to the community discussion and planning.
As are we.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
We'll close today Inside Cottonwood. I'm Mayor Diane Jones, your host. We'll see you next time.